Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Nathaniel Poli Experience. Today, we'll be talking about self improvement and self empowerment. I have with me a very wonderful person here, Janet Owodunni Babs, and we'll be talking and sharing from my experience to see how self improvement and self empowerment can actually help individuals to become better. For most people, when you talk about self-empowerment, it is leapfrogging and moving from one stage of life to another. It is something that almost everybody resonates with, right? So it's a question that comes to most people's mind. How can they move from the stage in which they are to another stage? What and what do they need to become empowered to achieve their life goals? So that is why we are going to be having our guest here, Janet, and we're going to be discussing about this topic. Welcome once again, Janet.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Good to see you once again. Yeah. So I don't know if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you are passionate about.
Thank you for this privilege and this opportunity to also air my own view about what I think and what I understand about self improvement, self development, and Janet Babalola. And I'll prefer you call me Janet Babs. That's the
All
usual
right.
name.
All right.
And
Great.
what I'm passionate about, I'll start from the angle of what brought about me being passionate about self development, empowerment, and improvement. I'm a law graduate, and through the trying times of which I was able to gain admission and I was able to get my LLB certificate, I was able to learn a lot of things. And I would count this period as my learning and serving process, the period I was able to understand what really life is all about and what life has to offer individual. What I'm passionate about, passionate about myself. Why do I say about myself? It takes a lot of courage for me to be passionate about myself. I value myself. I love myself. So if I should consider the next person, I have considered myself probably 10 times more if I consider the next person. Not because I'm being selfish here, but because I believe in myself developing. I can't give what I don't have. So it's only when I'm developed I can also help the society get developed. Being passionate about myself, I'm also passionate about relationship we keep, how we keep them, the time we spend. It goes a long way to tell about how you're building your life. So I am also passionate about the relationship. I'm also passionate about learning and teaching. This learning, acquiring knowledge, and also sharing my knowledge, my experience with those around me. That's one of the great passion I have. And one of the things I'm passionate about again is the entrepreneurship spirit that grows around, that seems dull around me. Passionate about it. And that has really ignited the spirit in me to study further and to probably research more on how to develop myself, how to improve myself, and how to empower myself. I think that's the major thing I enjoy or probably call as my passion in the living life we are in today.
Hmm.
Then one of the thing I think I'm passionate about again might not really be it, but I see it as one of my passion is faith because
Okay.
it has a lot to do about my living. I said earlier that I am passionate about myself. So defining that now goes a long way in explaining how passionate I am about my faith also, because my faith happens to be my practice, my way of life, the way I relate with people, my relationship, and even my learning, my teachings. It still boils around my faith. So I'm also passionate about my faith.
Hmm. Oh, oh, we have a lot of things that you're actually passionate, and they're quite really interesting. And these are facets that actually affect every other person. Talked about
Mhm.
being passionate about relationships and self empowerment and faith and learning. And in the end, when you look at life and evaluate life, those are the things that actually define meaning or our existence to some extent. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, but since we're talking about self-empowerment, I would like us to dive into that a little bit. Um, to talk about your motivation. What motivated you to say, "Oh, I want to start. Like, I want to become. I want to learn this. I want to learn that." Since you say you're passionate about learning new things as well and improving yourself generally. So,
Yeah.
was there any point in your life that actually led you to that conclusion that, hey, this is what I want to really do for myself?
Yes, I think that boils back to the self empowerment being the theme. What do you really understand by self empowerment? To me, I think self empowerment is having control over your own life.
Hmm,
When you are empowered, when you, I don't know the right word to use, but I will call it being powerful in your own capacity, being powerful in your own clique. That is how I see self empowerment. And I thought the only way I could have control over my life, I could live a responsible life, was to get involved in doing one or two things that could affect the next person, that could be positively influencing on other people. That was what really brought about it. So I think it still brings out the light of self empowerment, having control over my surroundings, having control over myself because I love myself.
hmm, amazing. I see why self improvement is very, very important
Yeah.
to you. But if we're to take a deeper look into some of the things you decided to do to actually improve yourself. I mean, at some point you would have maybe you talked about earlier about how when you were finishing college or university, as we say it here in Nigeria,
Yeah.
and and then you said there's more to life, right? Because you saw that, hey, beyond my LLB certificate, at least within the waiting period, there was something I needed to do to actually get myself to this particular point. So what would you say, at what point would you say was the realization of that particular decision to say, okay, this is what is happening, this is where I'm actually heading, and this is what I want to do for myself. Okay, she,
Hi.
yeah, welcome back. Sorry, having a little network
Sorry, I guess
challenge.
the network.
Yes, yes. So, my question was, you talked about how when you were about finishing university, you were wondering that there was more to life, and for you to be able to achieve those things you wanted to achieve, you discovered that you needed to be empowered. So, what are the steps you actually took? What are the steps you took at those points to actually see that you were in the right direction towards self-improvement?
Okay, self improvement is more or less improving one's knowledge. That's the general knowledge or thought about self improvement. Like the word improvement, you're already having a standing position. You want to add to what you know. You want to add to what you've had, you've learned. So the process, I would say, was the very first step was making the right decision.
Hmm,
We would not know from onset this could be the right decisions, this could be the wrong decisions. That's life generally, the uncertainty about life. But oftentimes, when you value yourself so much and you know what you're passionate about, you know what you want, I think it's a drive for you to actually know where to go, what to do, how to go about it.
hmm,
And I could say from my personal experience that it didn't take me so long to decide what I really wanted to do. How do I want to improve myself, or how do I want to empower myself? It didn't take so long because along the line, like you said, during my college days, it was barely a session during the academic program that there was no strike. So even before gaining admission into the college, I already saw reasons why I had to go into tailoring. Probably we'll call it fashion designing, but the same thing. I had to learn how to bake the normal cake we know, pastries, all sorts like that. It took a long while, but along the line, I learned a lot, not just the skill I was aimed at acquiring, but also I was able to understand life generally, that life is all about process. Might not really
Mm,
come the way we want it. But along the line, if we are determined, if this is really what we want to improve ourselves, want to be empowered, want to be developed, we also need to push ahead, notwithstanding the obstacles that might come our way along the process. And if you look at it from another dimension, when we talk about self empowerment can come in different ways. The way I see it, self empowerment could be social, it could be economical, it could be political.
mm,
Um, it comes in diverse ways. So if we actually want to develop ourselves, if we want to improve ourselves, it's more or less like you're touching every angle of being developed, being empowered. That's why I mentioned earlier. It has to do with social, educational, psychological, name it, whatever dimension you see it. But in all, they work hand in hand to develop us, to make us improved in every area of the different areas we find ourselves.
mm. Amazing. It's really interesting that when you're developed or empowered in one aspect of life, it somehow comes to affect other areas of life, just like you have rightly noted. For example, let's say you are empowered economically, right? So you might discover that,
Yes.
hey, my social life is now getting really, really
Upgraded.
better. Understand?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Some really cool type of things are happening. I mean, you can enjoy life at a better um, pace. You
Yes.
understand? But the whole essence of this improvement is to be able to control outcomes, right? So
Yes.
for most people, you talked about uncertainty, that there's so much uncertainty um,
Mm,
in life,
I love
but then you
this.
also talked about control, controlling the outcomes of your life. So, would you say it's always effective in terms of when somebody is empowered? It's always effective that the outcomes are actually automatically controlled the way they want.
No, I would say no, it's not.
Uh, okay.
Because along the line, during the process of empowering yourself, like I said earlier, due to the uncertainty of the environment, the society we find ourselves, there are a lot of things that happen along the process. And that's why so
Hmm.
many persons
Okay. Having network challenges.
are willing, they strive so hard to empower themselves, but along the line, they drop. Along the line, they drop. They get overwhelmed with probably the challenges they encounter along the line. One thing I was made to understand during this process, in which I'm also still undergoing, is that when you're determined to be self empowered, to be self developed,
Hmm.
it's also an opportunity for you to get to know your strengths and your weaknesses.
Okay.
So it's more or less like you might not really get what you want as an outcome. You might not really get to that target or that goal you're aiming at. But the most important thing is when you try again, or probably if you try again, there is 70% assurance that you will do it better. And
Hmm.
you're still assured that you might end up getting your goal, aiming at what you want. It might not come at the first try, at the second try, but trust me, at this learning process, able to gain a lot of things, a lot of mistakes are being corrected. You won't fall a victim. You won't have to face such challenges again.
Hmm. Amazing. It's really also interesting to know that you made a very interesting point where
Okay.
you said that in the quest to self empowerment, sometimes it might not always be you might not get it right at the first time. So you learn,
Yes.
you get up, you start all over again. I think it's like
Yes.
that for almost every aspect of life. For most things, we might not necessarily be able to control outcomes, but to a great extent, that desire to continue pushing, continue trying, might see that you get better and better at whatever you're seeking to pursue. Um, when you are being confronted
Mm-hmm.
with some of these challenges, right? There are a lot of barriers, especially for self improvement or empowerment. Let's look at it from, let's say, economic empowerment, for example. Now, would you say at the point in
Okay.
which you were pursuing or seeking, yeah, self empowerment, you you encountered some barriers, and how did you respond to those barriers that you encountered?
I could need
Oh, network challenges. So I guess it's having network challenges. So we've been discussing about self-empowerment and how it affects people's life and outcomes in life. We talked about passion, things that you're passionate about, and how, to some extent, when you're focusing on certain things, you are pushing in a certain direction. You might find yourself gravitating towards that particular um, direction. So why do we have to actually seek self-improvement? One of the reasons is to actually become better versions of ourselves. And in the process of doing this, we might face challenges. Okay, our guest is back. I was asking a question earlier about some of the barriers that you encountered in the process of self-empowerment, that you wanted to empower
Yeah.
yourself, and how did you react to those challenges that you faced?
How how did I? Sorry, I didn't get that. How did I?
How did you react to those barriers?
Okay, along the line, I think it was quite discouraging.
Hmm.
It was quite discouraging, but it's more or less like the normal games we see the athletes playing. When you remember there's a medal ahead of you, you're expecting, or probably you're running a program in school. At the end of the day, you'll be patted at the back for doing well. You get a gift for trying your best. When you remember the goal you have ahead of you, you keep trying, notwithstanding the challenges, notwithstanding the barriers along the process. You get encouraged when you remember you have a goal, you have a target ahead of you. So I think the challenges I encountered, I would say wasn't so good, because at the point in time it was looking more or less like you're not serious. You
Hmm.
don't really know what you want. Or and at the point in time it got to the barrier of financial challenges. You understand?
Okay.
You wanted,
Yeah.
you just know what you want, but because of finance, you might not be able to get what you want. I think that was one of the barrier also. But when each time I remember that I have a target ahead of me, I am encouraged and I proceed. I
Hmm.
go on with it.
Hmm. Amazing. Okay. So the thing is, barriers might come when
Yes,
we are actually going towards a particular goal or the other.
yes,
But our response matters a lot. For you, you mentioned that you try to picture the end goal, right? There's this
yes.
popular saying that the end justifies the
The
means,
mean.
and
Yes,
you mentioned about processes, and for every journey, for every desire, there are usually processes, and sometimes it might not be
yes.
really palatable. But for
Hmm.
you, you've set a strategy that looking forward, right, and saying, okay, this is what I really want for myself. And I believe if I continue doing my best, I might be able to achieve it. I think a lot of people can actually relate with this as well, because I mean, you think about people who are struggling to achieve a particular dream, and the more they put in energy, the more they try to get certain results out of it, results might not be coming. And some of these might be those barriers. You said financial constraint. I mean, it's a normal thing in this part of the world, right? Whereby you have amazing ideas and there are no ways to actually execute those ideas. It could actually be a stumbling block if there's no right attitude towards it. I don't. Let's talk about maybe social empowerment, because you said one of the things you're actually passionate about are relationships, right? Is there
Yeah.
any would I say relationship between your relationships, right, and your
Okay.
empowerment, right? Because there's this saying that I think it's a popular cliche that says that your network determines your net worth, and the
What?
birds of the same feather flock together, and all
Mm-hmm.
that. So, would you say that has been like that in your own situation, that your social circle has had an influence on your self empowerment processes?
I would say yes. I would say no.
Okay, great.
The yes is process and everything. You meet some friends, you go into relationships that might not really be what it is to support
Hmm,
your goal, to support your purpose. Referring back to the barriers that we encounter or probably the problems is also perfectionism,
hmm,
when you just want everything to be perfect.
okay, amazing.
So this is blue, you want it productively blue. That has really caused a lot of harm than good to the process of getting what we want. Then I think another thing that had caused barrier for me is fear. Yes. And
Hmm,
now coming back to your question about relationship, what it has to say about being self-empowered, we really need to determine who we keep um as a clique, as friends, as
hmm,
we go into relationship as partners. Because from my own experience, I one time went into a relationship in which it was a no to that knowledge of self-empowerment. I'm not saying the person was against self-empowerment, but that particular
hmm,
self-empowerment I was trying to acquire, my
hmm,
partner saw it as probably something not worth going into, or probably skills not worth acquiring. It was more or less like, I deserve more, I shouldn't go into this. And when
hmm,
you keep partners in which they don't see what you see, they don't see the purpose at which you're delving into that goal, it has a negative influence on whatever goal you're trying to achieve. That was why I said
hmm,
earlier the answer is yes and no. However,
okay.
to bring it to the positive aspect now, I, I actually would say my family, my siblings, my parents also was a very good standing backbone for me, encouraging me that you might not get this, but you will get this. So it was more or less pushing me to keep going, to keep going. So
Hmm,
I could say that is the positive aspect of it. I had family and friends who believed in my purpose, who believed in my goal, who understood what I was going through, and
yeah.
was ready to also. But coming back to that of having a partner which doesn't really understand or probably is not seeing what you're seeing, you can imagine me having just such partner only in the whole cycle throughout the process. Trust me, along the line, I would have dropped, and will there will be no will to try again.
Hmm,
And that also brings about one of the barriers when you don't believe in yourself. That's a barrier also. When you don't believe in yourself. Trust me, when you believe in yourself, come rain, come sunshine, whatever it takes, in as much you have an eyes on the medal, you keep going, notwithstanding the relationship, the cycle you find yourself. However, probably will come to that. But along the line, I was able to understand that, like you said earlier, your network goes a long way in that in determining your worth, your net worth. It's more or less like the social gathering you find yourself each time, the clique you keep, the friends you work with has a lot of influence on what your tomorrow will be like, what your relationship will tell of, how you build yourself, how you also interact with others, and what the end result of this whole process of empowerment, of development, of improvement would tell.
Hmm, amazing. Um, it's been really, really interesting seeing you talk about some of these points. You did mention about how relationships can actually be for good or for bad in terms of how they influence your quest for self empowerment. But when you were talking about the barriers, you did mention about perfection, right? Perfectionism as a
Yes.
strong barrier towards. Can you probably give more light or throw more light on that, especially from your own experience? Would you say there has been some point whereby you took that route, and how did you later discover that hey, this is not the right way to approach things?
Okay. A quick experience was the present business I'm into roam delivery, the roaming delivery within the city and Kwara State at large. At the instance I started, or probably I drafted out my plans, there were expectations. I wanted it this very way. Along the line, I realized this was a new system coming into the whole structured system already. It's more or less like you're infusing your own new system into an already established system. So it was so strange to the whole structured system, and it didn't really come out the way I expected it to come out.
Mm,
However, I got discouraged. I felt like, no, I expected it to be this way. In a day, I should have probably like 20 orders because it's for a start. And along that, I thought, okay, probably in the next 2, 3, 4 months, I should be having up to like 20, 50 in a month. I should be able to give a good record of it. So I expected everything to look so
okay.
that's one of the barriers. However, along the process, I had to learn that it's not it doesn't really work that way. It's not you're giving in A, you're expecting A in returns. It's not that you're working so hard to expect B and you must get B. So we shouldn't put our mind into the fiction of we want everything to look so perfect.
Mm,
It doesn't always work that way. You still have to go through the process. Coming back to probably the skill of fashion designing, when I was learning how to sew, I used to look at my boss and like I want to sew this exact way he's sewing. You can imagine such thoughts.
yeah.
And he had to learn that for like 3 years. And even the 3 years after he learned that, he still kept on learning. Every opportunity he finds himself, he keeps trying to add more skills to the acquired skill. Here I am, just like a year plus into the system, into the field in acquiring the skills. I want to just sew the way he's sewing. I want to design the way he's designing. You can imagine such
Mm,
thoughts of perfectionism. So I think it's for us to learn that if eventually there should be perfectionism, I'm not against that. But if eventually there should be any, it has to go through that process. There
mm,
must be a process to tell of the end results. And I think that links it back to when we talk about the imposter syndrome, especially for
Okay,
women.
amazing.
Yes, we women oftentimes there's a way we want to see things. Okay, at the point when we already have that what do we call it, preconception that this is how it must be because I want it to be perfect. It end up not being that way, especially with the ladies. We
Hmm.
get discouraged. We get discouraged. That is where the imposter syndrome comes in because even research has showed it that men are more or less like, except if they don't attempt. But if they do attempt, they still have that strength to push further than women. But if women also, the funniest part is this, if women will lay their hands to do that and are determined, they beat, they also beat the men 10 times
Yeah.
better. However, we get discouraged easily because of little barriers you find it. I wouldn't call it little, but I think it's also a call for we, the women, that we should always take the syndromes of not always getting it right. Our ability, we always questioning, doubting our ability. Why? Because of that.
Hmm. So, Joel, you made something. You said something earlier. You said believe in yourself, right? That's one of the ways to be able to do that. And Joel actually um, responded by quoting that statement of yours, and then you
Okay.
just gave an instance of how for some women that they might not necessarily, if I can use the word, believe in themselves, and that's one of the reasons. What do you think is the way forward for in such a situation where somebody is feeling, can I do this? The imposter syndrome, just like you said, what should be the way towards solving that particular problem so that we could become empowered?
Like we said earlier about the various aspects at which empowerment might come socially, politically, educationally, various ways. The most important thing for us to believe in ourselves right now, first should start with we building the right kind of clique, the right kind of relationship.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, we want to talk ourselves into doing some things, but it's more strengthening when the next person tells you you can do it. Oftentimes we
Amazing.
just want to we encourage ourselves and it to be like I want to do this, I can do this thing, but it comes with more results or better results when the next person tells you you can do this thing. It's a push for us, and it's more or less a call to you that for this person to have told me I can do this thing, I can really do it. You might not really, it's not so easy to believe in yourself, especially when you have the wrong kind of clique, you have the wrong kind of relationship, you probably you don't really, you're not self-structured, or probably you're not aware of what is exactly happening in your surroundings. But when you keep the right relationship, you might be lucky for the next person to encourage you better. You believe in yourself. I think that is one of the major steps that can easily keep us going, even in the society we find ourselves.
Okay, okay, great. So
Yes.
keep on believing yourself. Get a support structure, right? A system
Mm-hmm.
that actually motivates you to
Yeah.
pursue those goals and dreams that you actually want to do to become an empowered and improved person.
Very
That's one
true.
way. Um, but one of the things I've come to realize lately is the fact that for you to achieve anything in life, you have to be intentional about it. So basically, what that
Very
means is that you have to decide this is what I want and then go for it. Um, what are the ways do you think people can actually be intentional about, let's say, for example, improvement, right? Because just
mm-hmm.
coming across and say, okay, let me just do this, or somebody tells you this, and then you decide, okay, let me try this out, right? It might not always go that way, right? And sometimes you
Yeah.
might get discouraged when you don't have the strong reasons why you are going into something. So, what do you think is the way forward? How can people become intentional about improvement?
I would start from the old words we all know that there's no harm in trying. And we should also have it at the back of our mind that it doesn't always come out the way we expect it to. So it's more or less like when you know this, it encourages you, and probably along the line when the challenges flows in, you are being encouraged. Back to your question, I think I would reply based on my personal experience. One of the major things that probably made me intentional about self empowerment was reading books. It might not really work for the next person. As I said, from my own personal experience, reading books. You read
All right.
books about the relationship you keep, about your finance. You read book about social awareness, how to build yourself socially,
Mm,
economically, politically, educationally, name it. So I would say first and foremost, books encouraged or probably also helped. Then I'm sorry, I'm supposed to take it chronologically, but it's just coming in like that.
ah,
And I think
no
another
problem.
thing was expanding your network. When you expand your network, you don't limit yourself to just this very box that is being placed for you. You expand, you reach out to the next person, you learn from others. I think it also helps you to be intentional about self empowerment. And another thing is setting your goals. Setting your goals. We the youth oftentimes we make this mistake. I am part of them also. I got to know this at the later hour of me going
Mm,
into the struggle of my life. But the point is, you don't just make goals, you want to do this. You make realistic goals. You make achievable goals, goals that are actionable. And not just you don't just make them, you write them down. Make them as a point of duty by writing them down. If possible, you break down those goals into the actionable steps you need to take. Don't just say you want to buy a car in the next 2 years. How do you intend buying a car? Probably you're just a salary earner. When you eventually get that money to buy a car, how do you sustain? How do you sustain yourself? How do you maintain? So it goes along when you have to break down your actionable steps you have to take to achieving your goal. Then, like I said earlier, just as you also try as much as possible to create you also create an actionable and or probably a realistic budget. Coming from my own experience, there was a time I was going to the fashion designing business I'm into, and when I was trying to draft out the plan, the budget was more or less like 4 million for what I really wanted.
mm,
But honestly, it was so clear that it was not realistic to me. So I think that got me thinking, and I learned from that it really needs to be a realistic goal you're breaking down, something achievable. The short, the medium, and the long term goals, break them down. I think that's a very good one. Then you also have to evaluate what isn't working and what is working for you.
mm,
What is
amazing.
working, what is not working. You have to really evaluate that, because if you keep your blind eyes towards what isn't working, you just help yourself to get the same results you've always gotten, and at the point you get discouraged, and at the point you stop aiming at that goal you really want. So like I say, you also need to really evaluate what is working and what isn't working for you. Then there's this word I used to tell myself. I try to identify my blind spots. my blind spot. When I say blind spot, means my weaknesses. The weaknesses I can't see myself.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
I call those around me, like, okay, friend, this is what I'm going into, or probably this is what I've been doing. What do you think I'm not doing right? What do you think I need to add and subtract? It's more or less like the general business plan you have, or probably just who are already into the business. They'll ask you to give them a feedback on their performance or their customer service or whatever. So coming home also, it's more or less like you ask the next person, what are your blind spots? What are the things I'm not doing right that I cannot see myself? That brings about you getting your weaknesses and working on your weaknesses. However, you can also get your strengths better when you also learn to enjoy the moment. Don't
Hmm.
We don't have to anticipate, we don't have to get scared always. How will tomorrow business go? How will tomorrow motivational outing go? How will tomorrow this go? How will tomorrow? Let's learn to enjoy every moment. Not like you enjoy the moment, forgetting what you should do. But when I say enjoying the moment, means if it's time to rest, rest. You don't have to work out yourself, because you also need an healthy mind to push or to carry you through the struggle, the challenges that might come your way. So you need to enjoy the moment. Another point again is creating your routine. We the youth, we are fond of always sticking ourselves to the television. All thanks to African magic. All thanks to
Right.
time. Yes. But if we truly want to develop ourselves, we need to also create a routine in which we must follow. It's not just we just saying we want to do this, want to do this, but we're not following it. We should create a routine in which are achievable, which are realistic, which are obtainable. I think that also has a positive influence on we the youth. Then I think, like I said earlier about relationship, you should also find a partner who is accountable for the next things that might come in place, because along the line you might not be opportune to always be here and there in achieving your goals. So you should find a partner who would not probably add more problems to your problems already, but rather will be a helping hand, who is accountable, who will help you stay responsible in achieving your goals. I think so far I pick that as some of my intentional ways of self empowerment.
Hmm. Okay. Amazing. Amazing. You've talked a lot about how to be intentional about self empowerment. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons for self empowerment is because there is a weakness existing, right? So, for example, if I
Yes.
say um, I I want to be empowered in a particular industry, in a particular field, that means I
Mm-hmm.
feel that I have a lack, right? And I
Yes.
need to acquire either the right knowledge, meet the right people, form the right partnerships, and
Mm-hmm.
what's not, in order to help me to be able to um, be empowered. So at the point of
Yes.
empowerment, I am no longer weak at that particular area. And I
Yes.
think in the world we live, empowerment is something everybody um, thinks about, from government to the private sector. I mean, in the private
Mm-hmm.
sector, for for instance, workers in a particular organization might be taken to for routine training so that they will acquire skills and be empowered to be able to do a particular job.
Mm-hmm.
Some
Yeah.
government officials might buy some things and say, okay, we're empowering our constituents, even though sometimes it doesn't really uh, end
It
up
doesn't come out
being.
the way we
Yes.
expect. Mm.
So at some point, I think there was a state whereby transistor radios were used as an empowerment tool for for the constituent. Who knows? Maybe it's a way of them getting information, because we talked about learning and how learning is crucial to
Yes.
self-empowerment. So let's look toward that learning angle now.
Okay.
From your own experience, what would you say
Mm-hmm.
have been those learning opportunities that have kind of defined your life or helped you to become empowered. Perhaps let's say you sought knowledge in a particular field and then it brought a particular result or outcome. What would you say about that? Is there kind of a correlation between self-improvement, knowledge, and then empowerment? You could give examples of how it has worked out for you.
Okay. We aren't going to pretend or neglect the fact that um there's um there's an atom of truth about every business should bring home profit. Although we
Mm,
have some business in which we believe it's not for it's rather charitable rather than for profit, which isn't really true because every business must bring home profit. You might end up throwing back the profit into the business, but there must be profit. That is one of the signs at which you know you're progressing in your business when there's profit. So um one thing I had to teach myself to understand was you shouldn't really expect much aiming at a target. So at
okay.
the beginning, the business might look like there's no profit, there's no income, nothing, it's just there. But nonetheless, we can't neglect the fact that some knowledge were acquired, some skills were acquired, and all of that. Coming back to my experience now, okay, let's use that of fashion designing as an example. I can't remember when last I took my clothing to a fashion store or whatever to get them mended or sewn or whatever.
Mm,
And each time I dress, I'm putting on a native attire, Nigerian made fabrics like that. It's really the I don't get admirers like, wow, your dress is beautiful, good on this, like that. So the fact that probably I don't do it dressing to aim profit, it's one of the things. It's worth the process.
okay.
That is the profit I've made for the fact that this confidence it gives something, and probably sometimes you get to church and you to be like, hey, she's the one that sewed my clothes, and you feel big about it, like yes, I did this. I think it's a plus to you. You might not really be able to influence the society at large, but influencing the society is a step A. Mr. A might be opportune to influence Mr. B, and it goes on like that. So it's more or less like your own little knowledge being acquired also still goes back to what you built. So I think examples of instances, the skills has really given me a plus, or I would say an
Mm,
edge over what exactly I'm seeing in society or probably what other people are facing. But trust me, it's a plus. It's an edge over so many others.
mm. Okay, great, great. You mentioned skill acquisition and how it has saved you a lot of cost, right? And it's very important because for
Mhm.
most people, those things that they are good at has really helped them to be able to, will I say, save a lot, right? Something that they spent money on and all that. And I think it's really
Mhm.
important for individuals and people to actually constantly seek self-improvement. Sometimes it might not necessarily be for business purposes, right? So it might not be, hey, I want to start a business, so I want to learn how to make clothes. For some people, they might not really have the hang of how to go about selling, right? So they might know the skill, but how to go about selling it might be a problem. But just like you mentioned, I mean, you, what you would have spent paying for tailors and fashion designers to help you make dresses, now you do that by yourself. So there are a lot of skills as well that people can actually acquire. It's not every skill that you have that you definitely monetize, right? So there are those that you might just have it for your own self, right? To make yourself
Yes. Mm-hmm.
better at a particular thing. For example, now if I have good plumbing skills, right? Whenever my um, things at home are bad, I don't need to call any plumber to come and fix it. When I'm good at engineering, I don't
Exactly.
have
Not just for you.
to, yeah, I don't have to call on anybody to help me to fix it, because this is something I can do for myself. If my phone
Do.
is bad,
Mhm.
for some people, their phone might just be, let's say, restarting, and then the next thing they do is, this phone, it has bajeo, right? And then they start looking
I
for
agree.
somebody to help them to help them fix it, when all you could have just done is switch it off and switch it on, and then it gets
Mhm.
uh better. So self-empowerment actually can go a long way, not only in things we can monetize, but things we can actually do for ourselves, to help ourselves to become better at what we do, or to help life become better for us. Um, so basically, that's what I think. But then you mentioned, at least in your business, right? You mentioned how
Mhm.
actively or intentionally seeking certain knowledge has, would I say, empowered you to become better. Would you say does it come to a time whereby you are already empowered? You know what you've got to know about a particular business, about a particular industry, and it stops there, or is it a continuous process? From your own experience, what would you say it has been so far?
From my own personal experience, it's a continuous process. It's it's an everyday learning. Using my experience as an example, the sewing techniques I acquired, like we know the fashion world gets better each day. It gets more improvised. There are better ways to do the same thing you might have learned. So it's more or less like, despite the fact that I no longer have to say yes sir to somebody who will teach me, but oftentimes I visit the YouTube, the bloggers, their messages, the way it is being passed on enlightening us better on what we already have, or what we already know, or what we already acquire, but a better way of doing it. So it's more or less like learning is a continuous process until we get down to the sixth feet. We keep learning one way or the other. We don't stop learning. For example, even the fashion designing I'm using as a have to wear tomorrow now, and the next person will look at you and be like, wow, this is outdated.
Hmm.
Who wears this? Who does this way? So it's more or less like, if I don't get myself updated, if I don't keep learning, I'll end up be left behind the scene. And trust me, that is not a good thing. So that was why I said from the beginning that self empowerment has to do with learning and teaching. You learn, you keep learning, and you also have to teach, you keep teaching, because it's what goes around. As you're teaching, you get good at what you do. As you're learning, you get better at what you know.
Hmm. Okay, amazing. So there's the constant need for improvement. So
Yes.
what you're trying to say is, you don't get to a stage and you say, I'm already empowered, though, right? And then that's the end.
Not
You,
at
you still
all.
have to get better and better and continue to seek for ways to do things better. And I think it's a way in which we can approach other areas of life. I
Life.
mean, when you have that kind of mentality, you always seek for growth and progress, and there's life in general is actually on a progress momentum, because from the day we are born, right, to the
Yes.
day of the day, right? What basically happens is that you are constantly growing. You're constantly growing,
Yes.
either biologically, in terms of knowledge you've acquired, in terms of how you're becoming wiser and all that. So life in itself is actually a growth process. right? A
Yeah.
progress, and we need to approach our quest for self improvement
Mm.
like that. There are some people I've come to realize who might, okay, they try to learn everything, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so today they're into this, tomorrow they're into this, and um, anything that just comes, they run into it, right? And I think um, self improvement might not necessarily work in that particular area because there's this popular saying, jack of all trades,
Master of none.
master none. Yeah. So mastery is very, very important as well when you're pursuing to become empowered, right? So it's better
Yes.
to have one skill, right, and be
And be good at
extremely
it.
good and better at it than
Mm-hmm.
any other person than having multiple skills and then any other person can just displace you. So I think we can actually take a look of that from that perspective, especially when we talk about how to improve ourselves and become better individuals. Um, so before we round up the program, because we're almost out of time, what would you say is your final words to youths or young people out there who are listening to this and watching this and on what they need to do for themselves to become empowered?
Okay. First and foremost, what he said earlier, Jack of all trade, master of none. I think it's a slap to me also. I not until when I had to expose myself to better things, I got to understand that it just has to be one thing at a time. I personally had to go into catering, had to go into baking, had to go into decoration, had to go into fashion designing, had to go into name it, the common things that were just coming. I just wanted to do everything available. But along the line, I understood that it doesn't really work that way. You can offer all at the same time. So it's more or less like just show me what you know how to do best and do it as good as you can. And I think that goes a long way in helping the society even better than having it here, there, and you end up not giving your best in each of those things you presume you know. So I think
Hmm.
it's good we focus on one. And to the youth, to we the youth today, pandemic presently eating into the economy, it's also a show for us. Like we always say, even in every disappointment we could find blessings in it. I think it's also an opportunity for we the youth to acquire the necessary skills that will help us get better. If you're pursuing your career, learn to do it better. If it's the Microsoft work, you have to learn design, Microsoft designing, whatever it takes, how to build your CV better. Just do something. If it's your career you're pursuing, if it's skill you intend acquiring, or probably to buttress your stand, do it to the best of your ability. Let's just do something. We should stop being idle. Find something to do. And above all, we should learn to trust ourselves and trust those around us. We find it very difficult to trust those around us. That's why sometimes you talk about online business and probably you want to promote the next person. The issue we have is trust. And we end up
Hmm.
undermining the next person's business. And tomorrow you find yourself in that shoe and nobody's promoting your business also. So let's just try to encourage one another. How do we encourage one another? Let's try to trust. We know we have so many dishonest persons out there in the society, but we still have few honest ones who will willingly do the best for you. So I encourage every one of us to just like the word of God to say, whatever you find your hands to do, just do it well. Do it well. So I encourage every one of us, whatever we find ourselves doing, is it career pursuing, is it skill acquisition, whatever it is, we should do it well. And nobody should stay idle. Nobody should stay idle because like we all know, the saying goes, the devil's handwork. And trust me, we won't want to blame it on anyone when the outcome comes in play and we are regretting our steps. I think that's the major thing I have to tell the youth. And I pray God will help us all. And it's only
Amen.
if we try and take our steps that it could go better. Not in the Bible, but it's a popular saying, heaven help those who help themselves. Let's help ourselves so that heaven will help us. Thank you very much.
All right, it's been a wonderful session with you, Janet. And thanks to everyone who has actually joined this program. I believe we've actually been able to pick some lessons and learn a lot from this conversation. And that is why this program exists, to be able to share stories and experiences from people so that others can be able to learn from and draw lessons about how to become better in their life. Thank you once again, everybody. Thanks for being part of this program, Janet. Hope to see you some
Thank you
other
very
time.
much for having me.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. Have a
Bye.
great day, everyone. Bye, everyone. All right. Bye, everyone.